for the cybersecurity session. While they're getting up, let me say we benefit from having one of the world's leading experts on the technology industry's view about the global standards and the debate about the global policies behind those standards. Dave Welsh at Microsoft, who's chairing and moderating this session, has worked with the panelists to focus the conversation in ways that I think you'll find very interesting, especially because these are people who are feet on the ground, dealing with reality. And when we talk about cybersecurity and the privacy of data, it's good to start with reality, because often we hear about cybersecurity and cyber defense in an abstract context. In a city very rich in data, a city is a bullseye target. So Dave, take it away.
Thank you very much. Good afternoon. Everybody doing well? You do realize we're going to talk now about your privacy and your security. Still doing well? Okay. In my world, a smart city is a business conversation. It's not a technical conversation, because there's the real challenges. So let me just clear that right up front. It's not technology. There's technology, but the real challenges, the big ones, are business. I'd like to let the panel introduce themselves. I can't do justice in terms of what you do, but I think you're going to find some very interesting perspectives here. And let's see if we can agree on things and disagree on things, because we live in a very diverse world. So starting with my right, please tell us what you do and who you are.
Hello everyone, I'm Indrani Chandrasekharan. I'm actually the regional cybersecurity strategist for Symantec. As you all may already know, Symantec is one of the largest cybersecurity solution company in the world. Although we are very famously known as the antivirus guys, yeah? But we have evolved since. We are not just the antivirus. We have actually, based on the emerging threat landscape, we have actually looked at, the various aspects of cybersecurity threats, and, IoT is another extension of that. Yeah.
Good afternoon. Thank you, Dave, for the introduction. Yunus Al Nasser, Assistant Director General of Smart Dubai Office and CEO of Dubai Data Establishment. We are leading the Smart Dubai initiative into transforming Dubai, becoming the smartest city, with an ultimate goal of people's happiness. People's happiness is the aim that we are looking forward to, and we are leading the transformation of the city towards it by making the city more efficient, by using its resources, providing seamless experience to the residents, and making the city more safe. And I will underline this in the context of this conversation, making the city more safe and creating an impactful experience for residents and visitors of Dubai. Today, Smart Dubai initiative is leading the digital transformation of Dubai, which have started maybe a couple of decades back. And Dubai today is very well advanced in terms of digital transformation in each dimension and sector. But it was necessary for us to lead that transformation into different level and to different scale, and make sure that there is a unified approach and there is a holistic approach into where the city will become more interactive and create people's happiness. We believe data will fuel and will create the insights into the transformation, and that the data plays a great role into smart cities transformation today. And we hope by end of 2017 becomes the smartest city, and working together with different constituents of the city, being individuals, government, the private sectors, and coming all on board together in order to drive this transformation and making it more attractive rather than working in silos.
Hello, I'm Wan from China. I'm working for the Minister of Housing and Urban Development. My main job is the urban planning and the policy, and also the standards for the smart city. So in China, so we were the very famous and very popular for the smart city, but it's not, we were thinking it's not just ICT, it's including infrastructure for the water system, energy system, transportation system, and the ICT system. So 4 years ago, our ministry published the National Smart City Pilot Project, and now we have the more 300 cities to join our the big project for national. And also I working for the ISO TC268 SC1 as a vice chair, and we were just published the proposal, the new proposal for the smart city, for the smart city infrastructure, data sharing and data exchanging. So it's my main job. Also I working for the IEC. We have the new working group, SYC. I have the 2 working group, convener. So I want to, my main field is the urban planning and the city management. Is not the security. It's very difficult for me to talk about this session about the security. But I want to say that we need I think in the different smart city as my failing in the foreign, for example, the EU, America, and Singapore also, that do the smart city is the bottom up. They're using the small system, maybe ITS, maybe the smart grid, smart the bicycle, so it's a small system. But in China, we do every big project, big things is to top down. So our central government wants to the many policy to how to do the smart city, the concept, technology, and the security. I want to sharing my information for you. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I think we've got a very diverse panel here, and if you think you've got a problem with your city, that gentleman's got 500 cities. So, and he still has all his hair. So before coming on stage, I asked how many people were virtual. Gordon said 400. Understand we're 5 or close to 600 people now, so this is an interesting topic. My job this afternoon is to keep the conversation going and not to say too much, but to get these people to talk a lot and share experiences, and to get you into the conversation here. So let me open up with a few remarks. In about 4 weeks ago, in June, the New York Magazine, which is a pretty famous magazine in my part of the world, ran a story, and the link, I believe, is on the Twitter that's going out right now. And it was called, it was actually called Envisioning the Hack That Could Take Down New York City. It's a long article, and it sets itself in the future, December 4th, 2017. It's an interesting read. If you've got nothing else to do or you want something to read on the flight home, that's one to read. And it talks about a scenario that's based on reality. So it's a future scenario based on attacks in the past. Next to the article, there's a side column of about 50 actual hacks that cities have suffered that went into that publication. And just to give you a taste of what it's about, the article talks about the attack starting with connected cars. You can get connected cars right now. I just came from a meeting in Detroit with the automotive manufacturers, and they're talking about connected cars and cybersecurity. Anyway, the attack talks about cars being taken over and crashing into each other. And suddenly, if you've ever been in New York, there's total gridlock. But that's just the beginning. To quote the article, no one yet has realized that New York City has just been hit by a cyber attack. Or that with the city's water system, mass transportation, banks, emergency services, and pretty much everything else now wired together in the name of technological progress, the worst has yet to come. The article goes into unfolding the scenario of an attack of a major scale in a major urban center like New York City. Something in terms of the devastation of a major natural disaster like a hurricane. And, but But the interesting thing about this scenario is it concludes with only a dozen people had died in the attack. But the city was undeniably changed. No buildings had been destroyed. No bombs had exploded. No money had been stolen. But the public confidence level in the city was beyond devastation. So in terms of that article, it had a number of examples of real-world attacks that have happened in the past. One of the references mentions the Homeland Security Department in the United States, which if you've ever entered the United States, you've had to deal with these people. And the Homeland Security Group was recently estimated that one major cyber attack on a city cost $50 billion and caused 2,500 fatalities. It's very serious. There's a common or a popular attack going on right now. It's called ransomware. Basically, it is where attackers get into your system and entirely lock up the system. All the data is locked up, and only they have the code to unlock it. In February of this year, a major hospital in Los Angeles, ended up paying $17,000 ransom to the hackers. Now, it's such a profitable business, the hackers even have English language help desk for the people getting ransomed on to help them find the money and put it in the right accounts. According to the FBI this year, ransomware victims paid more than $200 million in ransom so far, and we're only July, compared to $25 million 2 years ago. Okay, so there's a lot of interesting statistics. One of them, or references, is one of them is a recent study that found that nearly half of all of us would pick up a random USB memory stick on the street, take it in the office, and plug it into something. How are you going to deal with that one? But just to leave it on a little bit of a high note, in 2014, a gentleman in the state of Ohio wrote this on an Amazon.com review on automatic thermostats that are connected to the internet. The gentleman had written the following about the thermostat. He basically remotely accessed the thermostat in the home of his ex-wife, who had left him for some other guy. And he wrote, "Since this past winter has been so cold, I've been messing with the temperature while the new lovebirds were sleeping. Doesn't everybody want to wake up at 7 a.m. in the morning, 1 or 2 degrees above freezing?" And then he gave 5 stars for the thermostat. So if it's getting to the public press, it's capturing imagination. If there's a financial model behind it, it's driving hackers. But in all of this, I think you're sensing that cyber attacks are very creative, and they're getting more creative all the time in ways we haven't thought. So enough of the intro. Let's get into the conversation here. And just to set the context, I think we've heard smart city is not it's more than technology. It's much more than technology. The big challenges start with people, and people, the citizen, the industry is what we're doing this for. Now, we play different roles as people in terms of a citizen or part of a business or in a public function, but we're all part of the same community. So we're all in this together. As evidenced, you're talking about the potential of a cyber attack on the scale of a natural disaster in a way we've not seen before. And the recovery is very hard. If it's a natural disaster, you can see the streets are flooded. You can see the bridges are out. You can see things. What can you really see when a cyber attack really happens? Can you even see the attack happened? In that scenario, New York City didn't realize until it was too late. Another thing I think we heard, and this is where I'm hoping to hear some interesting perspectives from Dubai, the city, and China, the country, is trust. I think we're going in a smart city from a hierarchical control to a distributed trust environment. It's a new relationship structure. And we're not just seeing it in cities. Smart manufacturing, the IEC has just produced a smart manufacturing report. It says the same thing. We're going to a new paradigm. So let's start with the citizen, and let's start with the topic of privacy and something called personally identifiable information, PII. I'm going to assert, and then I'm curious to see what the reaction is here, that privacy is, number one, it's an important human value to all of us. I'm going to assert that its protection is a matter of government policy and regulations by country. My privacy is going to be different than yours and yours and yours. And that's a very complicated process, how governments come to what is our values and privacy. Heritage, value, belief systems, a lot goes into that. But personally identifiable information in a digital city, a smart city, in a new digital world, that's something for technical security standards. That's something we can address through technical mechanisms, in part. So I think, though, we're talking about essentially civil liberties. Your liberties, my liberties. And so I'd like to ask the question to my friend from Dubai as a start. If we're talking civil liberties and privacy and PII, are we doing enough, or what are the challenges you're facing in a leadership position to create that environment that will lead us to trust?
Thank you. That's a good question. Privacy is, I think, touches everyone's daily life in different contexts, being individuals or being even organizations or corporations. People tend to protect their data and to look after its privacy a lot. And I think, again, I would refer to a collaborative approach between us as a local government of Dubai, together with the private sectors, with individuals, to come across on how do we really build a standard or a policy around privacy is the key into coming to a common understanding. Today, the individuals are sharing lots of information with the governments to get different services offered to, and as well they are doing with different private sector organizations, banking sectors and others. So lots of information is already shared. But what does privacy mean in their context is really important to us. And coming across together on one board and discuss what does that really mean, and take the voice of individuals today into account, into any policies and regulations that we are producing, is the key towards really building future trust on how that data sharing is really taking place in the city. Another thing is today data, by sharing data as much as it creates an efficient and seamless services, it also can be harmed. So again, education is a key over here, is how to utilize to the benefit of providing good services to individuals and citizens is a way of how do we really build this new culture of sharing and even taking that data toward open data. I think in each and every session today and since the 3 days that I've been part of the summit and forums, data have been one of the key topics that have been discussed in each and every forum in different contexts. We've heard it today in the context of power and context of energy and other aspects of cities today. So it's really the key. It's a matter of how do we really educate people from government, from private sectors, individuals, into using that data and maintaining its confidentiality and its privacy. One thing I would like to add also in this context is Dubai Data Initiative have started in the end of 2014. And when we've looked into how to really address opening and sharing of the data and keeping an aspect that we've looked at the holistic approach of how to open and share data. And share data is a key and essential part of the data today. We said, okay, let's get everybody who have that concern on board, and let's start drafting the mandate that would enable the city. And let's bring the key stakeholders on board together with us, rather than getting out a policy or regulation and then facing the challenges with its implementation. So these are the steps that we are taking now today towards addressing some of these concerns.
I see my friend from China nodding his head. Okay. Agree, disagree?
Yeah,
Different perspective?
Yeah, of course, just like I introduced, in our country we have the many 277 pilot city. I visited half of the city. I visited the many mayors, many management for the smart city. But I think it's a very important thing is the issue, the city issue. It's impossible, so the security and the data sharing, that opening data and exchanging data is very important things. But our local government, the manager, the mayors, these things, who is the owner of this data? Who building this data? And who used this data? So in the 20 or 30 years after we have the building the many different ICT systems for the different local government development, for education development policy, and the ITAs and the transportation system. So they have the different system, different data to how to sharing, how to use it's very difficult. It's not just a technical problem. So this is one. And secondly, I think is the issue is that we local government is have no so much specialist to check the security for the data for the human source, the problems so just like IBM, your Microsoft China, you have do the many education project in our local government, pilot city project too, how to use the human resource. So I think the security for the smart city is not just the data, maybe the information, maybe the system and the system. So it is a very concept system for our local government. So in China, we will have the top design. We have a top design but of course it's very difficult things we will face the different level, different conditions, the cities, very small town, it's just the 2,000 people, maybe it's a big city for maybe 1 million, maybe the 10 million people, and just like Beijing, Shanghai, so the big cities, how to do the sharing the different data, the data's owners, but the different development and the different owner. So my proposal is maybe we can do the different level for the security, and one is very strong for the national, for the government. The governor is have to save the safety for the citizen, for the governing system. So it's very strong level. And secondly, for the industry, for the company. So as you know, in China, we have for example, we have one very strong company for the remote sensor data that gets the many city, the GIS data, mapping data, but is owned by this company, and also by the Alibaba. So Alibaba, the many the information by this company. So how to use the company, the business data to support our government data for smart city data, I think. But last one is the privacy for people, citizens. Citizen is very soft. It's not so strong. So for example, you use the mobile phone. The carrier, the China Mobile, can, if there's not connection with the power on or power off, can know your location-based location. So I think how to save our the privacy for the people and the citizen and people, the citizen also can use from the governor open data and from company open data to the very enabling and the very quickly to get the information also important. We wanted to do the total solutions for the security data, the security for the system and the data.
I'd like to recognize that our friend from China has introduced some of this thinking into ISO. You're trying to bring it into the international community, which is great, and get the cooperation. And in Dubai, you've got a data law for cities. I mean, it's phenomenal. It's amazing. But so, data.
Can I give you a
Absolutely. I'm waiting. Ask the question.
Privacy and personally identifiable information, right? I think a lot of it is, you pointed out clearly, is a question of trust. But in order to have trust, I think you need to be able to demonstrate how are you mitigating the risks, right, of compromise. So that comes back to the question of how much of information, and we all understand that smart city or IoT is actually something that is evolving, and there will be lessons learned along the way. Just like if you go back 10 years behind or 15 years behind when internet banking was newly introduced, right? So we all went through that evolution period in terms of identifying what are the cyber risks with regards to, connecting to internet, right? Internet banking and mobile banking for that matter. So the question is then to identify, when you look at open data, you need to identify the objective or the use of that data. Is it for marketing reasons? Is it for research reasons, right? Improvement of life. You need to define that clearly. Then you educate the public, right, to say that, okay, these are the instances in which we will use your data. These are the kind of information that we take from you, right? And do they provide consent to that? So you need to do, whether it's survey questionnaire, right? You go with a pool of people and do a survey questionnaire and see what is their feedback. But from the researches that has been conducted, 52% of people have actually feedback from people is that they don't trust, right? That they have privacy, their information, privacy is of key concern to them, right? So, like I said, I mean, it has to be a very constant continual educational process. So from a security vendor's perspective, right, one of the components, the cornerstones that Symantec recommends to, in terms of IoT is that, one of the key criteria is to be able to, understand the system. So in order for us to understand the system and build mechanisms in terms of protection is to be able to, look at some of this data, right? What are some of the abnormalities, right? So what are some anomalies? What are normal patterns? So we are able to then analyze and come up with, decisions, right? So information that gives you some decision making. So I think from this perspective, we need to really look at it. We need to really clearly educate the public, right? So being very, very clear, transparent in terms of how you're using that information is very, very important.
Thank you. Well, let's change gears a little bit. We heard this morning a lot about sensors, right? And we heard our friend from Toronto say, listen, these things got to be calibrated. We hear data, you got to trust it. If you're going to take decisions on data, you got to make sure it's good data that hasn't been hacked and compromised, either when it's in motion from the endpoint to the cloud, or it's compromised at the endpoint, or somewhere in that process. You got to know it is a true representation of something. So there's this thing called the Internet of Things going on right now. It's an interesting topic, and the forecasts that are going on right now are just phenomenal. You can't think of a bigger number. It's billions and billions, and let's just say it's a big number of things in the city that could be giving data. Okay, it's a big enough number that even Bill Gates thinks it's a big enough number. Okay, so it's a big number. Now everything's getting connected to each other, right? One of the aspects of a catastrophic failure, like this New York magazine was talking about, is the cascading effect. One thing brings down another thing, brings down another thing, because it's all connected. It's somehow dependent on each other. And if you're looking at, I'm going to propose something, and I'm curious to hear reaction. Today, a lot of the hacking is intrusion, it's vandalism, it's my credit card, it's my privacy type of stuff. that it's largely the entrance into a system. It's not actually turning a car into something lethal or a drone into something a little bit more than that it is right now. That probably only certain, at a national level, you have the skill sets, the power, the muscle to actually do something like a Stuxnet, okay? Melt down a nuclear reactor. But I've heard estimates that in the next 5 years, we could be going from the vandalism, it's irritating, and I've got to rescue my privacy, to a critical red state of it's cyber terrorism. Okay, it's maliciously going after infrastructure of the city, that new infrastructure that's all connected up. So I'm curious to hear any reactions from, in this new world that we've heard of public-private partnerships and public, the PPPs, whatever you want to call them, where you're building trust and you have new governance situations and management situations where you're responsible for the urban mobility, the infrastructure, or something like that, but you're not actually doing it. It's Uber, it's somebody else in your space. How are you looking at that from the policy regulatory space, you know, in anticipating, and I'm curious to hear how the threat model, how the attack surfaces are going to evolve in the next few years, but should we start with, how are you looking at, what's your attitude right now to this as a city?
But before starting, let me add a point over here also. I think most of who are following the cyber securities and vulnerabilities that are coming, and especially in the context of connected systems or connected sensors, today we all know we had this beautiful car downstairs here, the BMW, and the vulnerability that came onto BMW connected systems. And that is one of the vulnerabilities that is raising, according to the reporters that have been reported back in January, and no actions have been taken until now. So again, you know, these are big concerns on how we are really, are we reactive or proactive into the ways that we are addressing these concerns. And I think an effective cybersecurity approach that we are taking today is baked in our processes from the very beginning. So let me take an example of a platform, Smart Dubai platform that we are building at the moment, or Dubai Data. When we started, they said, okay, let's start drafting the mandate and looking after the data and the set of policies and regulations that will govern it and will protect it, and at the end will take it to a state where it can be shared and open. So let's get involved and let's be collaborative. So this collaborative approach also on and being reactive, proactive, sorry, on the way that we're developing policies and regulations into these new services. So when new services coming, like IoT services and connected sensors, working together with the solution providers and as a city and as a governance and cybersecurity threats to come all together on board and develop the right policies is really the way to take it forward. And these are some good lessons that we've learned from some of the initiatives that have been driven in Dubai, and we are continuously using such a model into being really reactive towards, proactive towards any new initiative that's digitizing the services or making our world much more connected and bringing more concerned bodies together. There are actually in Dubai a couple of councils that's governing many of the new services. One of them has been have started the beginning of this year is around blockchain, for example. Blockchain is a big interest today, and this is an added value to the security, but to the governments and to bring the governments on board to use such a technology is a big concern. Are we lacking the regulations? Do we have the right policies to govern it? So instead of having wide implementation, then acting on, okay, what are the security concerns? No, let's start addressing it from the beginning, and let's draft the rules and regulations that would govern it so that the implementation of it wouldn't cause much of harm.
So let me ask you something on that one before I get the other reaction here. I've run into two approaches. Okay, one approach is it sounds like this has got to be there from day one.
Exactly.
The minute of day one, it's just in the thinking. It's not an afterthought. A lot of the smart city promise is driven by innovation. And you want to create an environment, I think, or I hope, that will allow innovation in ways we couldn't imagine. 5 years ago, who would have thought of this Uber thing? I was in Hangzhou a few weeks ago. First thing I did was call Uber. Mm-hmm. Uber has more value capital in the market than General Motors, Ford, and somebody else. Who would have thought of this thing? So, how do you balance regulation without being over-regulation? How do you create that environment? How do you stimulate the innovative part? How do you spark that imagination? Because you're not going to do it all.
Yeah,
you're relying on others to do this.
I think, yes, we are living in a disturbed world, and these technologies sometimes can disturb some of the services and local providers also. When it comes to government perspectives or other perspectives within the city, again, yes, we shouldn't kill innovations by number of regulations that we are putting in place. And the way that we are taking today is actually there are great opportunities into these disturbed technologies, into improving actually the services that's being provided today, and even improving the security. So there are really areas that we can take and look at the advantages that these services are providing, rather than, for example, looking down and towards an approach where we try to close and contaminate the innovations that's coming around it, or the services that is trying to provide. So there is always a balance between how much you would like to secure or to govern versus how much you would provide of policies and regulations around it. And again, by having the voice of both parties or all parties to be together is the way that we are leading how to govern it for the futures. So if the government have been only, or the policy developers have been the ones who to think on, okay, how to govern such a service now, I think, yes, it definitely will kind of close the doors towards innovative approaches. But by bringing everyone on board, I think now that's really...
Sounds like bringing everybody together.
Exactly. And again,
in order to be able to find that level of risk that people will tolerate.
Yes.
To bring to your point, and then to use that forward. Now, agree, disagree? What's your view on this one? Because you got 500 cities. You got a big problem here.
Yeah. First, I want to say that I agree the officer from the divide, but our country, we have faced a very different city issue and city. The city needs to how to do clear the problem for the city, or maybe that you use the smart city. So just you said the Uber system. In fact, the many pilot city project, including ITS system for the smart transportation system, is from the local government push the many meaning IMB to push the ITS system. It's including monitoring is very big rooms, the monitoring and gets the single and gets the road, the condition system. But this data is just is looked by the boss of the transportation development. It cannot clear everything. So the traffic every day as traffic in Shanghai, Beijing, in Hangzhou, of course in Hangzhou. But just like Uber, it is the system, taxi systems. Also in China, we call it the Didi, the local company, also do the same. The system, it opens the data from my car, the local, the private car, and the citizen will want to this place to move to this place. It's the system, the sharing the data and sharing the resource, sharing the car cannot clear this system. So I think the data is controlled by the government. I'm sorry for your data come from the government and the data from for the company and the marketing. So as my resource, I think said the government do government's business, the company do the company business. That we are citizen is the smart, use the smart, we are happiness. So it's my I grade or degree for you.
That is something I've never heard of, but you know, I like the way you put it. I'm going to do some questions right now, okay? One question from the audience is, can private organizations really be trusted to keep personal information private and confidential? The reality is far from it. Now, is that a standards question? I mean, you're introducing standards around best practices and information. You've enacted regulations and laws that embody standards. There's work going on in SG20 and ITU-T. ISO's got TC268. This is all the data on the digital side. You know, IEC's got an active program. I think it's this week the Systems Committee on Smart Cities starts up. Are we doing enough with standards here? Or, I mean, to set the right background so we're doing things consistently?
I think
You got the CEOs of the major organizations. This is the time to complain. They're not here to hear how good they are. They're here about what's next.
Yeah, I think there is a kind of an issue onto how to govern data as an overall, both in government and in private sectors, and lack of unified standards on how to handle the privacies and handle the trust of how to utilize that data. I think maybe have created this culture of mistrust. Maybe we think it's worse than what is it at the moment, but I think today by driving more standards and policies and regulations around it, and in Dubai today, one of the objectives of the mandate is actually to protect those data as well. It's not only for opening and sharing the data, it's also to make sure that we have a unified approach into how do we address the privacies and confidentiality, how do we address building more trust so that individuals can share more of their data. Today we are talking, a lot of conversations have been between this public-private partnership. So one of the results of this PPP is that more of the government services would be with the private sector. So now, if you had a trust on the government, you need to have similar trust on the private sector, because now they are acting in terms of providing these services where the government is doing. So providing such a policies and regulations are really important to enable also this PPP, because it will be the way of providing the new services. And I think by the ways that we've identified today, and since we have addressed the Dubai data law and have that mandate have been issued, we've identified also there are around 34 policy products have to be created in order to reach the objectives of such a mandate and make sure that, yes, the city is enabled, the city can handle its data, both from public and private sectors. Many of the people today looks at such a law as of, okay, now private sector is mandated to provide the data. But actually, no, it's more about governing. Even there are lots of policies and regulations that they can use in order to build this kind of trust so that individuals can share their data without any issues and even having more trust with these entities.
So it sounds like there's a role for standards.
Yes.
There's more work to be done, but it's part of the equation. It's probably a key part of the equation, but it's still a lot of work to be done and that type of thing. Before we get into more questions and just considering the time, and we're not going to get all the questions done, but I'm getting a sense. No, I want to ask the question. I'd said, we've got the threat landscape today is kind of vandalism, but the tools are going fast. The attitudes are changing. The money is coming up. That it's incentivizing, and maybe one of the only ways to defeat the cyber attack is to make it so expensive they can't do it, they don't want to do it, it's not affordable. But in the next 5 years or so, how do you see, the attitude is it's essential, but how do you see the threat landscape evolving? I mean, give us your nightmare scenario. What should we be thinking of? Are we thinking enough of it?
Well, I think the fundamental thing is if you take a look at Symantec's ISDR report, right? So we talked about ransomware earlier. So it's a form of malware, right? So if you look at malware, crypto ransomware that actually hit a lot of companies and individuals in the last year, they made about 325 million in crypto ransomware alone, right? So that's basically locking your data, and smart city is all about information, right? And that's data, right? And with open data and all that, right? So you can see the scale of attack that's going to happen, right? Now, having said that, if you look at the threat evolution based on that, Symantec looked at, the malware release per day, right? In 2014, I think there were about 2 million malware released for the entire year. And in 2015, that is 43 million, right? So look at the scale of how people are. So it's an average of 1 million malware developed per day, right? So that's the scale that we're talking about. And majority of IoT devices today are not built with security in mind, right? They collect data, they communicate that data, but we need to look into all the point of where the data is being transferred to, right? Data, like you pointed out earlier, data at rest, data in transfer. So how are we protecting each one of those components today? And especially third parties, when you engage third parties to handle with a lot of your data mining, right? How are they handling that information? It's very, very crucial because if you look at recent attacks as well in Office of Personnel Management in the US, right? So 2 of those attacks was actually from, I think, 50 million records, right? Was compromised. That was from a third party, right? So when you look at smart city design, it's all about data. I think you have to take security into a very, important conversation, right? You have to really understand what are the risks that's out there, and that's actually not done in isolation. That has to be done as a collaborative effort with a lot of the security experts out there, and you come up with there are regulations that actually help. Of course, data protection laws in many countries actually helped a lot in terms of creating that vigilance. Of course, standards plays a very, very important role in that, but we have to take a look at what are the emerging threats and being able to build a lot of controls around it, right? And like I said, there will not be 100% security, right? I take a simple example of, if you look at transportation systems today, while people are focused on the automatic train systems and things like that, right? There is a basic avenue for attack which can come from your CCTV, right? Because it's IP connected, and this CCTV actually gathers a lot of information, right? Intelligent information, sends it back to a server that's probably sitting next to your crown jewel, which is your database server, right? So it's again going back to basic security practices. What are the fundamentals? Have you got the fundamentals right? And then how do you move along with, the threats with IoT?
So in the short time, I'm going to get back to 1 or 2 questions, okay? Change the gear a little bit again. After lunch, we heard Graham say one of the challenges is the value and commercialization of data. Now, if anybody knows challenges cities are going through, Graham does. One of the questions from the audience is, how will cities be able to resist the temptation to monetize, sell PII data? A while back, I heard from a city, they said, we're all for open data. There was a hesitation, and then they said, we didn't say it was going to be free. So how are cities looking at, or how are you looking at dealing with the data itself? I mean, from a security perspective, how do you bring it to, into the picture of detecting even the attacks are happening, and, what else happens to the data in, where you're at?
I think, again, going back to smart cities and how smart cities are structured today. When Smart Dubai office have been announced and creating a couple of establishments underneath it. One of it is Dubai Smart Government Establishment. Second establishment was Dubai Data Establishment. His Highness also tweeted at that time, he said, today we have completed the governance structure in Dubai to transform, to lead this digital transformation. And one of the entities who were also on board into that picture is Dubai Electronic Security Center. So you're having the city transformation leaders and looking after the city infrastructures and looking after the policies and governance, having data establishment whose focus is only on the data itself, how to open it, how to share it, how to classify it, how to measure its sensitivities, confidentialities, its intellectual property right around it. And then if you are generating insights out of that data, can that be monetized? What are the monetization policies around it? And having a security entity which is responsible of, okay, if there are standards and regulations, let's see if those standards are really creating any security threats by the way that is being structured. So this is one way of looking at it. There's other ways of looking at the holistic city approach again, into how do we protect and how do we have the right security policies and solutions that are around and being really mandated to be provided so that we're creating a resilient city over here. So having different responsibilities and having a proper governance around it is the key to move it forward. And there are different roles and responsibilities have to be played within the smart city transformation. We cannot today centralize all of the points towards an entity which is responsible for smart city, because it's much more bigger issues than just the smart transformation. It's as you said, it's security, it's data, and it's probably some operations and private sectors being in part of it. So having a proper governance is the way to take it forward.
Are you looking at the same, do you have a similar attitude in China, or how do you look at this?
Yeah, in fact, the smart city and our local government just like divide and the same level, the city with Suzhou, Shanghai, and Nanjing. So each local government want to say that the smart city and the smart transportation is just one city is not enough. So they are thinking about the standards, the data standard, the system standards, and connect with the Nanjing, Wuxi, Changzhou. So we were talking about the smart city group. So that needs the issue. Of course, you cannot can cut the hard connection with the city and the city by the transportation and the telecom communication, and the soft connect with the information and the investment, the money, maybe the people moved this city to that city. So that's, I think, the security and also the system and the data system is the same standards. Maybe is the local, the technical, the standards is very important, I think. And on the other hand, the 5 years ago, I back my country to the start of the smart city, the research. And firstly is the fighting with your big company from the other side, the IBM. They called it the smart city, and they pushed the IDC, the data center, and your Microsoft, the platform, and Oracle is the database. But in our country, you have high level, and the central government, the local government is not so. It's a security for the local government and the central government. So we were fighting with the big, just like Seiko and the different country. So also, on the other hand, the local company, just like Huawei, the TE and Baidu, that want to outside to do the maybe smart city, maybe the telecom, the project, also international. So on this background, I think the smart city, in fact, just like with the different SDO, ISO, IEC, ITUT, and JCT1s make the good, the standards for the data sharing or data exchanging. It is very, very important. We can connect the different city group, and the different country can use the more security, more important the standards. So 1 year ago, in our ISO TC268 SC1, we proposed the one new proposal working group is for the smart city infrastructure data sharing and exchanging. That we were focusing the water system and the transportation system, the energy system, water system, and the ICT system different. It's not hard connection, it's just ICT. We are talking about the data connection, data using data security. But we have no, in ISO, we will have not so many resources to research the sensor network. We just want to after get the data and how to use and how to get the security. It's all, I think it's all the same things for this smart city.
So we've got 6 minutes left. Let's see if we can wrap up and leave people with some conclusions here, some takeaways, okay? I'm going to suggest a few things, and then I'm going to see if how you want to agree, disagree, or add something to like what some conclusions could be. We talked a lot about data. We didn't talk about the infrastructure, the network. It's critical. We talked about, essential infrastructure of water and energy and matter. I would assert that in today's world with a smart city, information, the network is critical infrastructure now. It's on the level of water and energy. If any of at least in my house, if the internet goes down, it's panic. Okay, the lights can go out, the internet goes down, it's over, okay? And I think in a smart city, it'll stop the city. The information flow, if you stop it, you got a problem. So I think one of the new infrastructures in the smart city is the network, the communications, all the information flow. We talked a lot about, and maybe it needs more recognition. We talked a lot about trust and data, and it seems like the strengths of, if anything, we want to get all our forces acting on the privacy security topic. If you look at the strengths of the major international organizations, Electrotechnical, clear strength, IEC, networks, infrastructure, clear strength, ITUT, ISO, water, energy, intelligent transport, clear strength. What I'm noticing in some areas is the security agenda in the future is a combination of the virtual and the physical. It's the access to the endpoints have to be secured. It's the data as it flows virtually has to be secured. That there are standards that deal with physical access that have been around for years. There are IT standards. These different parts of the organizations need to come together. If the topic is anything, it's the security, the cyber-physical security. That's a good one that they all can share, and there's no overlap. We talked a lot, and we heard a lot about the new partnerships. It sounds like the new partnerships are essential to the cybersecurity and privacy agenda. No one can do it alone. We need the visibility. As you say, you're creating an internet of cities. It's not an internet of things, it's an internet of cities, and cities learn from each other. You mentioned Bitcoin, or blockchain. The whole theory there is, if you attack one, you have to attack everybody, which is virtually impossible almost when you do the math. How do cities tell other cities there's an attack going on so everybody puts their defenses up at the same time and recognize that that's going on to make it economically unfeasible to launch the attack? Partnership sounds like it's an essential. Public-private, public-public to private, whatever it is. We heard that you have to create the right environment. You need the vision. His Highness the Sheikh had said something. He set a vision. He set a direction. In China, you're setting a direction. It sounds like leadership starts at the top. Leadership in terms of cooperation, leadership in terms of an internet of learning cities starts at the top. You need to show the direction. That's what I'm concluding from this. It sounded almost like cities learn best from other cities. If you get your cities learning from each other, you'll get the network growth effect, which will be just, 2 + 2 = 5 suddenly. Okay? It's not 4 anymore. And so you get innovation starting to happen. And only cities can tell other cities, the bad and the good. So that's going on. But the threats, the evolving landscape is definitely very real. It's going to affect cities in a way we haven't seen before. Would you add anything to that list that you say here? needs to be on the list that we haven't talked about? We didn't have time. There's more than a dozen of these, and a lot of people didn't have a chance to ask.
I have one small comment.
Sorry?
One small comment.
Once.
That you've talked about Uber at the beginning.
Yeah.
And such services are not anymore provided from one local city. It's provided internationally. So it's all of the cities are benefiting from such a service. And whose responsibility is to make sure that that service is really secure and governed.
Sounds like the United Nations agenda.
Exactly.
Or an ISO agenda, or somebody's agenda. But it's an international agenda.
International agenda, and I think this is where collaboration between multiple cities and organizations are really important to make sure that, because this is the future, and this is how it will gonna be in the future.
Yeah. 50 seconds, or well, 30
I
seconds.
think one of the valuable things that I think is good from a knowledge sharing perspective is, learning from incidents, right? Cyber threats incidents affecting smart cities, as well as, being able to work with the various, business experts in terms of building use cases, right? Because these use cases will actually help to identify weak points within your business processes, right? So that will help to generate a lot of, standards development, even being prepared for that incident, even if it does happen. Even though you feel that you've put enough protection in place, it's bound to happen, but how do you, come out of that, right? How do you build a set of teams to be able to respond to those kind of incidents? It's actually also important.
Thank you.
So that's what the 10
Go
seconds.
for it. No, we're going to run over a second.
Yeah.
I'm going to pull rank here.
Okay. I want to, we will think about how about the 5 years, after 5 years, with the future for the smart city. We were talking about now what is a smart city, the eco city, green city, sustainable city, but after 5 years, what is the smart city? And now our team and with the different, the SDO and the colleges, so we were talking about the urban simulation. So the real city and the cyber space city, so how to do the use, just like Singapore, so you use the city simulation. So I think the feature is how the smart, what is the smart? It's not just the technology, just how to use the data. And of course, important for the security. What's the future?
So let me, before we get pulled off stage here, let me first of all thank everybody for your questions. I apologize, we just ran out of time. I'm sure there's hundreds of people online that have questions. I'm an optimist, and I don't think we were hacked in the last 60 minutes, so there's probably hope for us all, okay? And I guess my final question to you, to all of you in the audience is, so what are your standards for your smart city? And safe travels home. Thank you very much.
Thank you.